Hey, this is Ben King, Armor Down. This is The Art of Peace, the second out of 114 stanzas of The Art of Peace. And before I even get into the stanza itself, here's kind of what came to mind as I was thinking about it, as I was allowing my thought process to swirl around the idea that is presented in the second stanza of The Art of Peace. And the first thing, that the statement that pops into my mind and that has been staying there, is that heaven has nothing to do with acquisition. Heaven has nothing to do with acquisition. So let's begin the practice. The way we start the practice is by taming the mind. Taming the mind means to bring the mind into non-judgmental present tense awareness. In JPTA, it's non-judgmental present tense awareness. Non-judgmental present tense awareness. Non-judgmental present tense awareness has established that non-judgmental present tense awareness examines the present tense non-judgmentally. So that's not what I want people to remember. It's an idea. It's a more sophisticated idea, but the root of the idea from the warrior perspective, the root of the idea of non-judgmental present tense awareness is tame the mind. Think of an animal. Think of a strong, powerful animal. Before you can teach that animal anything, you have to tame that animal. You have to develop some kind of trust between you and that animal. Because without that piece right there, without that trust, you can't build anything. So you got to establish that trust first. Tame the wild animal. A wild animal has no trust. There's no consistency. There's no constant. So, when you tame your mind, you bring it into present tense awareness. And the reason you do that is because you have to build trust in what you feel. So you have to build trust in what you see. And what that means is you have to be able to rely on it. Know that it's there. Know that you can call upon it. Know that it'll work for you. So the first practice, the first piece of the practice is tame the mind with your senses. You've got to learn to recognize and trust your senses. If you feel your toes right now and you move your toes right now, you have to trust your ability to feel that sensation. If you open your awareness to light and shadow and choose to put your attention on the awareness of light and shadow, you'll recognize that you are choosing to put your mind on something. And as you choose to put your mind on something and see what's coming back at you, you can be aware of, trust in the fact that what you're experiencing in the present moment is happening. Now, what's going on around you is a curious phenomena. It's a curious phenomena that your mind will be inclined to follow. Awareness goes to the present moment, trusting in your capacity to interact with the present moment. The mind is free to explore sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. It doesn't mean thoughts won't come back. It just means that you have the choice to come into presence. once you come into presence, the next piece is the inclusion of the sensational experience at your 7 points. We just call them the points. First point is your ground, what's touching something. So if you're standing, what's touching something is your bottom of your feet. If you're seated, what's touching something is your feet, your legs, your buttocks. If you're laying down, your ground is every part of your body that's touching the ground. So the first point you send your awareness to is your feet, your ground. The second point you send your awareness to is the pelvis region. It's the region, it's the area. It's an area of operation. You think about Iraq. Iraq was the largest area, and then it was broken down into chunks. So our area of operation was Zafrania. That was you carve up the location, the whole, you carve up the whole into more manageable pieces. So we're carving up the whole of the body into more manageable pieces. Sensational environments. So, first sensational environment is your ground. Second sensational environment is your pelvis. Third sensational environment is your core. Fourth sensational environment is your heart space. Fifth sensational environment is your throat space. Sixth sensational environment is your head. And then the seventh sensational environment is your direct internal-external experience, which is exemplified by a full breath. You breathe in the external experience, you exhale out the internal experience. So it's just there's a constant circulation. And so your awareness, taming the mind brings your awareness into presence, and then training the mind sends your mind through the 7 points of awareness. Once you go through the 7 points of awareness, you then can make an accurate, trusting determination of what's going on inside you and what's going on outside you. Now, once you've established these positions, once you've established these levels of awareness, you have the opportunity to examine the phenomena of change. Change. The phenomena of change. So there's lots of ideas about what change is, but what I really want to talk to you about is what change feels like. So change has an external expression and an internal experience. So if you think about change externally, you can notice with your sight picture the changing landscape at an intersection. Think of the order. Now, the changing experience of sense of sound. The changing experience of moving your toes. The changing experience of your breath. Now, the point I'm trying to make to you is that change is taking place as a constant. Change is a constant. Right now, you can go through different variables of change with your awareness. Now, send your awareness to your feet. It doesn't matter if you feel anything. Now, send your awareness to your pelvis. Again, it doesn't matter if you feel anything. Send your awareness into your core. Again, it doesn't matter if you feel anything. What matters is that you can choose to send your awareness to the different spots. Choose to focus on sense of sound. Choose to focus on change at sense of breath. Now, we've got these things in us called autopilots. They create change. Autopilots create change based on memory, based on association in response to external and internal environments. Because everything's changing, we actually have autopilots that develop adaptive measures for that change to protect us. I want you to think of a protective autopilot. Think of protective autopilot, something that's taking good care of you. Now, think of it as something that is resonating, something that has a constant, like the sound of the water that you hear behind me. Notice change in the body. Maybe change in the heart, maybe change in the breath, feet, pelvis, core, heart space, throat, top of the head. Feel your breathing. Feel how it might have changed. This is your body responding as an autopilot. Protective. You might feel elevations. You might feel up. You might feel compressed. You might feel surprised. What does that feel like? Not the idea of it, not what it reminds you of, but just what does it feel like? Now, you might be experiencing thoughts. You might be experiencing flashbacks. You might be experiencing memories. Trust the present tense. Trust the moment at your sense of sound, right now. The ripples of what happened earlier may still be in your body sensationally, but see if you can notice how it's starting to change. Notice the return of the sound of the water around me. See if you can soften at your feet, at your pelvis, at your core, at your heart space, at your throat, at the top of the head. And see if, as you breathe, you feel the change. Autopilots are neither here nor there. According to some experts, you can get rid of autopilots pretty easily. That said, interacting with autopilots does not mean that you have to be afraid of them. And the reason you don't have to be afraid of them is because an autopilot is something that shows up to protect you. And once it shows up, all you have to do is look around, interact with what's going on around you, and see if that's necessary. If it's not necessary, you can just allow the autopilot, the internal experience, to just change like everything else is changing, and you're aware of it. You can choose to move your awareness around, just like going through your feet, your pelvis, your core, your heart, your throat, your brain, your breath. You can choose to move around, even if the autopilot, that's very important, shows up. You get to choose. So what this represents is the capacity to choose how to interact with anything. Anything. Can you imagine the ability to be able to choose how to respond when shame takes over? One of my deepest beliefs is the notion that what I'm doing is not good enough, or that I'm not doing enough, I'm not trying hard enough, I'm not creating enough value, I'm not organized enough, I'm not professional enough. That idea can be spun around to infinity, but the experience of it, the experience of shame, has a kind of a sucking effect. It kind of pulls at me. It's pulled at me less and less over time, but it's still got this kind of like sucking down feeling, this compression, this tightening. It's like cars going into a bunch of cars. You remember this? Did you see that image in China of the 50-lane highway having a traffic jam? A 50-lane highway having a traffic jam. Oh, can you imagine the level of stuckness being stuck on a 50-lane highway? And so I become less efficient when I feel shame. My experience of the management of shame pulls at me. the experience of it is in the top of my heart by my throat. It feels like a pressure. Like right now I have both my hands, one of them is above, my left hand is above my heart, my right hand is above that. So like two hands, two grips, one at the center of my sternum, one fist above that. And then right above my fist would be my collarbone. So it's right above the heart space and below the throat. That's where the experience of it showed up, the fullest intensity of it. So strategically, that experience, that pressure diminished my breath a little bit. It made, kind of from the perspective of my body, it made my body demand a little bit more attention. There wasn't freedom there. There was a compression there. So interacting with it, I'm encouraged to shift a little bit in my body weight, lift and kind of move around in my heart space, practice breathing from kind of a little bit more right or a little bit more left. Interacting with the kind of the internal pressures. So now there's sensation in my forearms, my elbows. I'm encouraged to relax in the jaw. So now my whole experience is change. So, the second stanza of The Art of Peace states, "One does not need buildings, money, power, or status to practice the art of peace. Heaven is right where you are standing, and that is the place to train."